Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 47, Speaking from the Heart. Today, we're going to extend our conversation from episode number 45, in which we discussed how we can extend ourselves beyond a fear-filled life, and now talk about how we can use that to our advantage to create our purpose. I think it's really important to understand the context of which we're discussing, because for many people, which I had explained in the previous episode of talking about fear, that we often live in a life of not just the things that we stay in routine and consistency, but maybe even breaking outside of that shell, where I shared a lot in the previous episode about my personal experiences to overcome and be able to share my true gifts to this world as a result of breaking some of those stereotypes, especially with some of the things that I have kept close to my heart. So with those things said, and if you haven't, go check out that episode before you dive into this one any further, because what I really want to build on today is not just the ways in which we can use our purpose to become somebody that we thought that we could ever be, but I really want to help find the ways in which we can elevate ourselves to being capable of doing the things that we can stay on our path no matter what might happen that throws us off. And it really starts with a conversation about how we can keep ourselves out of fear. I really like to talk about the fact that we have to understand a little bit about what drives our motivation of fear in the first place. Truthfully, fear often exists because of the ways in which we have to not only tackle the day-to-day that we have in our lives, in which we have to make sure we make enough money, make sure that we feed ourselves, make sure that we clothe ourselves, mainly the basic necessities. But we also have to realize that we can't let certain people, places, or other sort of circumstances control the way in which we can create some of those modalities in our life. I know for many of us, especially with some of our guests that we've had, especially Michelle Westgate, that was on one of our earlier episodes when we launched the podcast, it's really about not just staying in that complacency, but knowing that when somebody acts on the outside to try to make you feel like you're worthless, it means trying now to elevate yourself to that next level so that you're not stuck in that sort of complacency all the time. We often set ourselves up with having that sort of circumstance, mainly due to the fact that we cannot change what is happening because we assume that nothing can change in the first place. But we often confuse that with the fact that we have to generate steps, often laid out for ourselves, of the ways in which we can improve and create those values that we stick to through thick and thin. We have to find those values not just in the ways in which we interact with others, but also in the ways in which we can create not just that coveted life that we always sought out, but also make sure that we're doing in such a framework that helps us to continue to build the best opportunities that life has to offer. I know that sounds so generic and it sounds so vague, but the truth of the matter is that we all come from different walks of life. None of you might have grown up on a farm like I had, which I explained in episode 45 that helped me to create some of those responsibilities. But we also have to understand, too, that maybe those lives that we have on a farm might be completely different from what mine is. It might be that you don't have a number of degrees. Maybe you have a certain skill set that you have challenged, that you have ensured that you're staying on that path to help drive that next defined purpose in your own life. Regardless of what it is that has gotten you from point A to point B in the past, now it's about having a conversation of what takes you from point B to point C, to point C, to point D. Regardless of what those points are that are in your life that you have to get to that destination, it's about understanding what you can take today as steps to head in the right direction. So let's cover a couple things that I think might be helpful for you, especially when we're having that generic finding our purpose conversation. There are numerous authors, first off, that I could say for most certainty that might explain this concept much better than even I, a personal and development coach, could even do. But I think that it's important to understand that one framework or one side of the coin doesn't always mean that you have all the big picture. So I'm always encouraging people to read and read about what other people's stories are. You can do that in a variety of different formats. Especially if my Toastmasters background, I have loved listening to other people's journeys of how they got to where they are in Toastmasters, the international organization that works on communication and leadership development. But each of those stories, whether they're personal or professional in nature, each combine into ways in which we can all learn how we can get to where we need to be, especially if we're stuck in a certain sort of idea about ourselves. Maybe some sort of concept about what we are going through that has been time-tested and proven to not be the way in which we should handle it. But more importantly, above all else, is about learning how our experiences, especially with other people, can help us become better from learning from mistakes, learning in the ways in which they did their sort of processes, but also being able to learn in a greater purpose of how there isn't just one way to do everything. And that's exactly my point. How it works for one person doesn't mean that it will work for you. Finding our purpose often means looking at the bigger, wide picture of how we got to where we are in the first place. So being able to learn from others is a good first step to get to where you need to be. The second thing that I would also encourage that goes along the same vein of this is to watch as many videos as you can of some of the greatest speeches and even some of the best testimonies that are out there of how people got to be where they are today. It doesn't mean just looking at some of the most famous people, maybe actors or actresses, maybe politicians, maybe even activists for that matter. Although their stories are unique in nature, I'm talking more about the personal level. In other words, what are some of the people that we might even have in our own lives that maybe we never had that conversation with that could help us to understand how they found their purpose in the first place? One of the greatest people, especially although he's very famous and no longer with us in this world, Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, along with Steve Wozniak, actually has a great autobiography that was written about him that explains quite a lot about his own personality and how he interacted with others, which was eye-opening to me as to the way in which he treated others. But it also unlocks some of the beauty of the fact that his journey, although we might have some questionable doubts about his ethics and maybe even his demeanor towards others, it certainly proved that it doesn't always mean that you have to follow the same path as somebody else. I always encourage people to check out what autobiographies are out there and read about some of the people that have gotten to where they are at, especially in career fields or even in personal accolades that maybe you're trying to achieve as well. Obviously, I could say that you should work with a coach. It's time-tested. It's something that even as my business has done, I know I really would love to have more people come through and express that they're really looking to find their true calling, or in my case, to find their true voice in this ever-changing world, the mission of Your Speaking Voice, which we cover in an earlier episode. It isn't just about finding the right coach that might be able to help you. It's also understanding what is the process that you're willing to take in order to get from that point that you're at currently to the final destination. And notice that this time around, I'm not saying just from one point to the other, but looking at the world view of what you might need to do, of getting from that point that you are to where the final destination is. It can be a long, arduous process, and I can't caution you enough about having that trepidation and that courage to keep pushing forward. But you also have to understand, too, that it isn't just about learning how to get from that one point to another. You have to surround yourself with more than just one person. A great person that I have admired, that I have gotten to know more recently, has definitely done this by taking their business and even their personal commitment to trying to get from where they were before to another place by surrounding themselves with not just 1, 2, 3, maybe even upwards of 20, 30, 50, 100 people so that they are able to achieve their success. Each of us holds a key, or a fire, I like to call it, deep down inside of ourselves that allows us to be passionate about what we're able to do. So I always tell my clients that I might be just one of those pieces of the puzzle that they're trying to get to, but they might need help with other places, which is why I'm always interested in collaborating with other coaches to help each other build that biggest foundation of where we need to go in our lives, especially with running our own businesses for that matter. Even with that said, the personal aspect of what you are trying to do is about living that purpose-filled life, which if you have never written down what that purpose is, that big grandiose goal, if you will, of what you want to try to achieve, you might want to start working on that right now. And it doesn't mean that you have to figure out what that is right now at this very moment. Just having a rough idea of what you want to try to do in your life, especially with what that purpose is always a good starting place to get to where you ultimately need to be. Now, I might know from some experiences that sometimes that goal has changed, and I even have talked about in some previous episodes about how my past, especially with some of the people that I've had as influences in my life about what my career should be, has ultimately led me into now doing this podcast, even being a coach. But it's still not just about what I'm doing right now, but what I'm doing to evolve myself. Because even as we speak, as of this recording, I'm working on bigger aspirations of what my plan will be. And I'm really excited to be sharing that with you down the road at some point. But I know that my mission isn't always about staying stagnant in the moment in which I'm at. It's about always evolving that goal to get to where we need to go. And if I'm not capable of doing it all by myself, I'm going to reach out to the people that are capable of doing that and getting that sound advice. And it doesn't mean that you have to always pay for someone to be able to do that. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why would you ever say that last statement about not having to pay somebody else, Josh? Isn't that what you're out for? Isn't it about the money? Well, I have to thank my friend Kyle Slaymaker for saying this really early on, and especially as I started my business. Even in his episode in which we interviewed him, he expressed something that is so true into this day. It isn't about just the money. It is about the connections that you make, and it's the aspects of our relationships with others is what generates that money. So think about this for a second. Do you have a network that allows you to keep building your relationships and your confidence and determination so that you can unlock the best financial reward? Are you always seeking out that next penny or that next change that's coming out of the change drawer out of your business, thinking that you're going to be able to pocket that and be able to make it to the next level of whatever it is that you have 20, 30, or 40 years down the road? Are you living in the long term, or are you living in the short term knowing that you can create that long-term success? It is all about finding our framework. And I think that we often lose sight of the fact that it's always about the money. It's always about the money. It's always about the money. But as I have been recently reminded of, money is the root of all evil. Let me repeat that. Money is the root of all evil. If you're not taking into consideration the fact that if you want to have just this financial success, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. You're not doing it to lead a purpose-filled life, because if you're making your worship, your idol, to be about money, then what are you actually trying to serve in the bigger picture? What is it that you're trying to serve in the bigger context? One of the greatest influencers of my life was a sister that I met at Alvernia University by the name of Sister Pacelli. She's no longer with us. She passed away a number of years ago. But I had been fortunate to have one of her classes in which she really explained this concept very well. In that sort of aspect, we were able to learn so much about the opportunities that existed, not only in serving a Christ-filled life, but in the bigger sense, what we can do in the Franciscan way of serving others. Now, if you're not Catholic or you're not religious whatsoever, it doesn't mean that you have to be that. It's about the principle. You can always detach the religious aspect from the principle, which is what I'm trying to share with you today, is that it isn't always about what we're finding as money. What we are trying to find, though, is this capability of staying on that path of opportunity, so that no matter what happens, we are always staying consistent with the ways in which we can sustain that bigger goal that we set out for ourselves. Because we are able to create not just those goals that allow us to support that main mission that we have in our life, but we're able to bring a team around that reminds us that it's not just about the money, it's about the impact that we're trying to make. And we need to always remember that we can make that impact because we are doing it for the gifts that we have been given. You do have that purpose, which I have talked about, leading outside that life of fear. And if you stick yourself out with your neck and your head is exposed, I will tell you that people will see what you are truly capable of doing because they will see right through you that you want to lead that purpose-filled life, that you are the genuine article, that you are somebody that they should get to know. For the longest time in my life, I thought that I wanted to be somebody just like that, but I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. So don't take that same road that I did. Learn from my mistakes, just like I asked you earlier to learn from other people's mistakes. And don't do it the way in which now at 36 years of age, I'm finally doing what I was called to do. Because you can do what you are called to do if you're just willing to just keep that conversation going, not just with yourself, but with others as well. Even if it takes a village to solve all those different purposes that we have in our life, just know that there's at least one person that's interested in hearing from you, especially with the fact that we all need to be heard from time to time. And if you're not finding that support, especially like people that have gone through such situations like Michelle, which we have interviewed on this show, just know this. I do want to hear you because there's at least one person that does care. I do care a lot. And I really want to help others realize their true potential by not just seeing what it is to get from point A to point B, but to get from point A to infinity. To be able to really say to ourselves that we are living that life that we always wanted to live. That we are capable of being able to take a step outside of our comfort zone. And maybe we are able to not only create that level up experience, but to maybe create that full possibility of not just seeing what we are doing right now, but what our future self can be doing, because you are the future. You are capable of doing it. You do have purpose. And I want you to have that drive to not just find your defined purpose, but to have you be helped along the way. Thanks for listening to episode number 47 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.